Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here, and my guest today is Tracey Doxey. Welcome.
Hello, nice to meet you finally.
Well, we've been following each other on Instagram, and I see some beautiful Fair Isle designs that you post. And there was your journey to Shetland. But like before we go into all of that, I would like to know your story from the beginning. How did you learn to knit?
I'm quite old, so it's
Oh,
a long.
we've got time.
It's the beginning. Okay. I'm 60 actually this year. So I was born in 1963 to a very working class family in England. My mother was a cleaner and my dad was a long distance lorry driver. And I have one sister. She's 11 months younger. And our upbringing was interesting, shall I say. There were no books in the house. There was, not a lot of nurturing. So my knitting story started, I think, I used to make things all the time. Like I'd save Christmas cards and draw jigsaw shapes on the back and cut them out. And I'd save all the milk bottle tops. Probably people don't even know what they are these days, and scrub them with my fingers and make things out of those. And one day I saw in the newsagents a really big book, and it was yellow with a cover on it. It was 365 things to make. And every time we went in the newsagents, I can remember kneeling on the floor looking at this on the bottom shelf, all the things I wanted to make. There were things like doily things and dolly pegs and all sorts of things. And I asked my mum for the book for Christmas. And she said, "You want a book?" And it's like, "Yeah, I want this book." And I had to wait and wait and wait. And the book came and I made all those things out of that book. And there were things like, I was young, I was really young. And then, so I taught myself how to knit. My nana used to knit. My sister and I, identical cardigans for years. Nylon, Woolworths wool. That's all you could get in those days. And she never taught me a stitch, not a stitch. It wasn't how we were kind of brought up. And not like the Shetland ladies. They are born knitters. They're mothers. It's there. They're born and they're holding knitting needles. None of that. I remember a friend teaching me how to crochet. And I made a toilet roll covered in tin foil and crocheted basket around it for a Christmas decoration. And that was it then. I kind of started making things with bits of fabric. My mother somehow got an old Singer sewing treadle machine. And was it 1972 or 1977 when it was the Queen's Jubilee? Anyway, I made 5 miles of bunting for the entire street on this Singer sewing treadle machine. I was a child, and I picked it up myself. So there was something in me that just wanted to pick up things. So then, I grew up. I bought a knitmaster knitting machine, 250, and I knitted. I didn't even know Fair Isle then, or what Fair Isle was. I was 16, 17, 18, and I made these mismatched nylon wool jumpers that were Fair Isle style, but I didn't match anything. So the front and the back didn't match, the sleeves didn't match, nothing matched. And I remember making my then boyfriend one and his brother, and we went to see David Bowie at the Serious Moonlight concert in these nylon Fair Isle style jumpers. Never heard of Fair Isle. And I thought we were the bee's knees. Looking back, I mean, they were bad. They were misshapen. Everything was bad. And then I got married in 86. And before I got married in 1986, I fell in love with Patricia Roberts, and that she has been mentioned a number of times. Sadly, I think she died last year. I mean, the most exquisite knitter who developed her own yarn as well. So I was working at 16 full time. So I'd go down on the train to Covent Garden and buy the yarn, Patricia Roberts yarn, and knit these things. And me and my friend Colette had incredibly hard competitive streaks between us for these Patricia Roberts jumpers. And I do have one. I mean, I will show you it. Yeah, this is from probably I got married in 86. This is probably from 1984. So it was it's moss stitch, and it's got little bobbles over the top, and then the body is moss stitch with cabling going over, and there's all these different colors. So, and different sleeves, and she did all the gussets. I mean, she was an incredible mind. And then I knitted all of the vests. And what I learned from her is she never changed her motif color on the same row as the background. So you created something like this. I learned that years ago. And then I had kids and I knitted for them, and my daughter hated everything I made for her. Oh, here's something that I made for her. This is Patricia Roberts as well. And it still has the little frog and the little thing in the pocket from the cracker. My daughter's 34 now, so that's quite old. And then I started knitting things for my friends. And I lived at Chatsworth, actually, on the estate. So it's a stately home here. My ex-husband worked on the estate. So I used to get fleece, and I learned how to spin, and I did everything. You name it, I did it all. Cable, amazing jumpers. And then I stopped. For some time I stopped. And then I got on a train. This is years later, this is 2005, I went across China to Tibet. And when I came back in 2008, I got on a train here in Sheffield and got off in China. And I went to live in China for 2 years, and I picked up the knitting. It was mad. I just all of a sudden picked up the knitting again. And when I came back, I went part-time at work, and I sold my house to downsize to go back to university to do a master's in knitting. And I went in 2016, and I'd been to Shetland Wool Week in 2015, first time. And I just fell in love with it. Fell in love with the landscape and the beauty and the social history. And I was smitten completely. And then I went back in January 2016 for Uphelliar, the Fire Festival. Then I went to university to do the Masters that year, 2016. And my specialism became computer-aided design, inspired by Shetland lace. So I went backwards and forwards to Shetland to place these huge pieces of computer-aided design lace that I'd made back into the derelict properties of the abandoned derelict properties of the Shetland lace knitters who used to live there. And I just fell in love with everything about Shetland, everything. So I kept going. From 2015, I went backwards and forwards at least 4 or 5 times a year. It got very expensive until in 2019, I went to stay with Matty Ventrion on Fair Isle for 2 months as an intern, and I was 56 and lived with her on Fair Isle. And when I came off Fair Isle, and I stayed in Shetland for a couple of weeks, and something in me started to look around for properties. But whilst I was there, I started to make friends, and the museums in Shetland are incredible. You know, they keep their history. So their history is in the museums, but it's also tangibly visible across the landscape, because they don't need to knock it down to make a block of flats or anything. So you can touch and see and feel everything. So when I came back in 2019, I started to make my own little Fair Isle patterns, and I made the first one, which was called, I used to knit in tapestry yarn, anything. It didn't matter, just set off. But I designed the Shetland sea urchin pattern, and that's what started me, really. So this was the first one I designed, pure Shetland wool, and this is what I based my workshops on, with the tree and star to blend colours. And that's how I started my knitting journey. It got bigger and bigger and bigger.
What fascinates me when I see Shetlanders knit Fair Isle designs is the color blending, because it almost looks like watercolor, like it's one color bleeds into another, and it's like very subtle. It's not stark difference between the colors. There's like all the shades that you pretty much can't even distinguish until you put them into that fabric. How did you learn the color blending? Because now you teach color blending.
I do. I didn't learn it off anyone there, and I find a lot of knitting there very traditional, not particularly blended. But that's just how I look at it. So I started with the sea urchin hat, and so for years I have done swatch books. So this is book 1. And basically, I taught myself through doing everything, including keeping mistakes, because this you can see is stripy. And at first, when I did that, I had no idea what I was looking at. And as this moves on, there's inspiration, but you know, it gets very sophisticated. So I blend the back with even 3 or 4 colors, as well as the motif. And they never change on the same line after I learned from Patricia Roberts. And this is not blended, this is, you know, stripy purposely. I kind of developed it as well by writing stories about the woman who lived in the house that I bought. So it was about really looking at color, really feeling, because it's not, I do not sit by the fire or by the telly with a basket of yarn or a cupboard of wool and go, I like that one, I'll do that one, I'll do it. It's not about that. It's really about having a concept or a real idea of a starting point to design something, and the color comes from looking at the image or really looking at what I can see in front of me and feeling it. So you can blend through colors in color families, you can grade from light to dark, you can knit 4 different ways of knitting the same colors. You can knit light to dark on top of light to dark, or light to dark on top of dark to light, or flip them over. And then I basically, everything I did became swatch book 1, swatch book 2, you know, there's swatch books everywhere. And I develop my own skills by putting the time in and seeing what works and what doesn't. I never set off and knit something from beginning to end now, which I used to 20 years ago. I'd go, yeah, I really like that color. And then you go, what happened there? I never do that. And my knitting now is quite perfect. You know what I mean, with the color and the density and the fabric and the drape, because I've put the time in.
When people talk about, when usually you talk to knitters, right, there's these 2 schools of thoughts. There are people who love swatching just for the idea of swatching, and then there are people who will avoid swatching at any possible cost, right?
Yeah.
And I find that the longer I knit, the more I understand the importance of swatching, even though I'm originally from the camp no swatch under no circumstances. Do you feel like you've changed as well? Like when you, like now when you look at swatches, there, like what are you trying to get from swatch? What kind of information are you looking in the swatch?
Perfection, but perfection for me. This is the thing, it's personal taste. But yeah, I've come from the camp of, I certainly don't swatch for gauge, but I measure for gauge, you know, but after I've done swatches, I don't aim to start with gauge, I aim to start with color. What do I aim to get out of it? Basically, it's a combination of a real harmony, but something that really sings. So, for example, like the singing line, I call it a singing line, but it's called an accent line or whatever. That's really important to me. And that's the most difficult thing for me to get right. But what I aim for is something that shines, I think, you know, and Matty and I did a swatch each for a jumper that I did called Dear Susan. It was about Susan Halcrow that lived in the house. And I saw these photographs, and it had peats, a stack of peats in the background at the house that I'd bought. I knew the colours, I knew everything. And I thought, I'm going to knit this brown jumper, and it's going to be peats, and it's going to be like, you know, have these lichen colours and greens and everything in. And I did the swatch, and Matty did one with me also. It was a November afternoon. And I looked at them, and in my head, it was going to be fabulous. And the swatches were dull and flat and boring. So what I decided was I was going to knit her something like a jewel necklace. So I set off and I changed the colors completely into magenta and fuchsia. and all the bright, beautiful colors to make a necklace. So the swatch saved me lots of money and lots of time setting off with this peat idea. And then I ended up with something completely different. So that's what I'm aiming for, is something that shines and sings.
Well, you went to do the master's at pretty advanced age. I mean, it wasn't out of high school, and you actually did the bachelor as well, like later in life. I find like when people go later to college and they go to get their master's later, it's very calculated, because like you lived enough to understand the value of this money and how much you have to spend on time and effort to get that degree. Was that so much more special for you? Like, why did you feel like you need to go and study knitting?
Okay, Nottingham Trent University, I don't know if you know it, it's well known for its knitting. It's based in a city called Nottingham that is also well known for lace knitting, going back to the weaver's lace and all sorts of things. And the reason that I wanted to go back is because I was bored doing 9-to-5 jobs, you know, and undervalued, and life is very short. And what's the point? What's the point? This is not the most, it's not really the biggest change that I did. One was getting on a train and going to China, and selling up my house and going to do a master's, and then selling up and going to Shetland. So it's been a thing that I've done, but life is very valuable. And the reason I went to Nottingham Trent is because it was kind of within a commutable distance. The course was very good. And I wanted to learn something new. A lot of it was self-taught. I was the oldest one there. I was 57 when I went. And it is very precious. It's very expensive. And I used to do 3 days a week, and I could only afford to go on 2 days on the train. So I do half day at home. But there were times when I was wailing and crying to the course leader going, I have no idea why I'm doing this. This is breaking me. It's breaking me financially. And what is the point of all this? And the point is to really be in the moment and to have that time to be as creative as you want and express yourself. And anybody, they encourage anything, you know. And I actually, partway through the course, I thought I'd quite like to go and work with Sarah Burton at Alexander McQueen, because she's done this amazing lace collection. So I went down to look at it at Bond Street in London. My daughter tried all the dresses on. I took photos and I emailed her, and I told her the story of selling the house and going back to university to do a master's. And I'd been to see the lace collection. I was doing lace, and she invited me down. So all sorts of things happen that would never happen to you if you were doing a 9-to-5 job and never put yourself out there. So
I like absolutely love that. I love that story, because to me this is like very true, and a lot of guests of my channel, like this is the most interesting thing for me, because they would have even successful careers, right? And then at some point they would decide to go full-time into knitting and become designers, so like just change something in their life. And you would think like this is at the time when most people think about retiring.
No, I've ramped it up a gear, but in truth, I have a good friend on Farah called Marie, and I was saying to her the other week, I have the Patreon, and I do like behind the scenes, and this behind the scenes this month, I actually listed all the things that I did last month, all the hours that had gone into social media. You'll know yourself, all the hours that goes into admin, all the hours for the workshop, all the hours for the admin, the logistics, the pragmatic things, all the extra hours, and all the posts, and, you know, and all the contact people back, and all the hours. And you think, what is the value of my hour? And I must admit, when you're on your own, because I'm just on my own, I don't mean as a partner, I mean as a designer, I don't have the backing of other people. So that's really hard. And when things become your decisions, your creative design decisions become only about monetization, I think it's time to stop. I think it's changed. It's not about creativity anymore. It's not about, you know, development. It's about monetizing things, and that's not a good place to be.
want to ask you about, and it's like something I've been struggling or thinking about a lot lately. What constitutes original design? Because you're talking about, you mentioned the museums in Shetland, you mentioned the traditional motifs that they use in Shetland for Fair Isle. Like there is a huge history, like, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years of knitting. What made you feel like you bringing something new to the world of design?
Specifically, when I lived in Shetland, the house that I bought was called Smola, and I could trace its history from when it was built in the 1840s. And then I traced the family who lived in it for 150 years. And the last person of the generation was called Susan Halcraft. She was born in there in 1876 and she died there in 1960. Never went anywhere. Happy, you know, crofter, a cow, and she never married, really rare. And the more I researched about her, the more I looked at the pictures, the more I looked at the museum archives, the more I understood about her and the house and the landscape and the place. And when I designed from that place, it is original because it's about her and my relationship with her and the house and the place and the landscape. So it is original because it's something that I have created from my own research, but also it wasn't forced research. It just evolved greatly, roller coastered, you know, and it became, I don't know, it was really weird because I wrote the book and at the end of each chapter, I write her a letter. So it's called Dear Susan. And I think that because I was so isolated and there was no one else but me, she kind of became someone who wasn't living, but like a thing, a person that I thought about quite a lot. So the designs then came out of that, and they were original from there.
Let's talk a little bit about that book. Tell me, like, what made you decide to write this book, and eventually you didn't publish it, right? It's available through your Patreon. So let's talk about this whole process.
Well, I've always been a writer. So like when I got on the train and went to China, I have a travel blog that goes back years that I don't look at or touch anymore, but I've always been a writer. And I had the website and I was a writer. And I thought, well, why not write about the life here? So I have a drawer full of journals from that time. And they were observations. And they were so joyful and hopeful at the beginning, so beautiful. And then as time went on, I just became more and more isolated. And so I wrote about my feelings a lot more as it went on. And it was at times in COVID, but there's a different kind of isolation where you don't always feel safe, you know, and you really look around and you go, okay, if anything happens to me, I'm not in a great place here. And for example, like the stairs were very steep, so I'd go down, hold both banisters for the risk assessment because I could fall and be at the bottom of the stairs and no one would know. But I wrote the book because it was so, and it still is, so astonishingly beautiful, so astonishing. So it was a combination of the knitting and the landscapes and Susan and the house and the sea and whales and sunrises and beaches and auroras. It's all there. But then there's the isolation creeps in and like, could I sustain this? You know, and then you start questioning yourself, why have I done this? And so it was a really good journey, to be honest, to write it. And I did have an agent, Jenny Brown Associates in Edinburgh, but we didn't get a publisher. So I just decided to put it out monthly in alignment with the month that we're in. So we'll see how it goes.
When you came to Shetland, like, to me, Shetland is a fascinating place and I haven't been there. And so to me, it's like this fantasy land, basically. And I don't know what makes me feel like I lived there in my past life, but there is something about it. Did you feel like you belonged there when you moved there? Did you feel like you fit in?
Oh, I felt like I had never lived anywhere else in my entire life when I first moved there. It was not a quick decision. I'd been going backwards and forwards for 5 years. I've been going backwards and forwards for 4 and 5 times a year for 5 years. I had stayed for 2 months. I'd stayed for 1 month at different times of years. And I knew what the weather was like. But the reality of living there is very different to going to stay. And when you own that property, because I'm not from the islands, like it's a little bit windy here today in Sheffield, right? Out there, a little bit windy is 20, 30 miles an hour. You know about it. And it's relentless, you know, and sometimes it's exhausting. So like when it gets to go 40, you get out your car and you hold the car handle with 2 hands, and you get out and you hold the car door with 2 hands, and you shut it with 2 hands. And yeah, it was kind of, it was everything I dreamed it would be, but it was more in that it made me question myself. So when I went, it was as if I'd never lived anywhere else before. I was so excited about the house, and I shared this joy and this excitement. But I get really enthusiastic. So some people are not as enthusiastic as me about things, how they express it. I didn't feel as if I fitted in, if I'm honest.
Right.
And I do talk about that. I have friends there, and it's a difficult conversation to have with people, because you've made that decision to go there and you think you know everything. Like I've lived alone in Sheffield here for years and years, but living alone on an island is very different, very different. So
Do you feel like Shetland changed you as a person?
yeah, when I came back, I was a very different person. I'm kind of finding myself again now in a different way. But there was a year when I had no home. And so I've got 2 cats. They're here squabbling between each other. And there were times when I nearly had to give them away because I couldn't rent a place with them and all sorts of things. So it's like, you know, the law of, you know, security, where basically the home is at the bottom and the security, and then the creative practice is way at the top. Well, there was no time to think, let alone, you know, it was about survival. Survival is bang at the bottom. So that really changed me that year. And then I started to get settled. I've got a little flat again, and I've got a job again. But then, ironically, you're back at the place that you were before you went, when you're going, okay, what now? You know, and I'm more or less there. Not quite, but I'm back to the point where I'm going, okay, life's short. What now? You know.
So where do you see yourself going now?
Oh, I will never let go of this flat ever again. If I go, and I think I will go somewhere, I will always have somewhere to come back to. Having no home and genuinely being homeless is not a great place at all. I have just planned and booked a trip to Kyoto. So what I want to do is go to a place. It's like going when I lived in China, but I knew I could speak Chinese. So when I go to Japan, I cannot speak Japanese. I cannot read Japanese. I have no idea what is in front of me, what food it is, what that place is in front of me. Nothing, not a clue. And what that makes is it puts you into the immediate moment, and you are really present. Because what living in a city can do, and be biking to the gym every day and going to work and coming back, you're not really present. Not every, you know, not all the time. So as soon as I'm back in that position, I'm back to writing, I'm back to observing, I'm back to, I already have ideas that I want to go and meet certain people. And it's, for me, I've realized as well that the beauty in the world is real craft, real 100% craft. And so I'm going to go and see what I want to do out there. And I need to leave some things behind and start moving forward properly to whoever I'm going to be next. Life's a journey, isn't it? And it's not, it's stop, start, stop, start, but it is a journey.
Tell me about your teaching, because like what made you decide to teach people the color blending, and what's your approach to teaching?
I decided I was approached by a Canadian lady when I lived in Shetland. I went out in September, and by the Christmas, she wanted me to do her friends an online workshop to teach color and stuff. And I said, oh, I'm doing a business plan, I'm doing this, I haven't got time. So she kept messaging me, and I said, by the end of January, I'll devise it and I'll get back to you. The last week of January of that year, I got in by the skin of my teeth, and I did a workshop with her, for her and her 4 friends. And the day after, I did the same workshop with 4 people. And one of them is called Cheryl, in Shetland, and she still, follows me now. And I built up those relationships then with people many years ago who followed me, but also there's a new following for the color blending. I have taught for years. I used to teach English in China. I taught here in Sheffield. So I knew how to devise workshops, and I knew how to motivate people, and I keep the group small, 6 is maximum. And then I devised it from my previous experiences from the color blending that I do in my swatch books, and I put all the sheet together. So it's a fairly large presentation. So it's skills-based. So I start off, and the first section is about how to pick the colors and how that works and how to see it work and see what you can't see. And the next way is 4 different ways to knit the same colors. The next slide, there's a lot in the first slide. The second slide is 4 different ways to knit the same colors. And the third slide is go out and knit with your heart. Do not pick things up by the side of the fire, the colors there. Really look at what you can see, choose the colors, take the photographs, look at what you've got, grade it, and use it, and swatch. I try my hardest. I opened a little swatch Facebook group, and half of the people have joined it. Sometimes it's active and sometimes it's not, but it's good. There's been some really good people putting work on there.
Are you surprised by what you see your students do?
Yes, yeah, I'm really surprised. And what I find is, if I'm honest, I've taught this workshop to 450 people now over 2 years. So the addresses are really exciting, and probably only 6 I've Googled, like one in Alaska, then one in Paris. I had a little walk around where this person lived online. And, and I'm humbled by the people who want to join me still. And because my process is a bit clunky, and they all do it, and they come, and sometimes it's 2 in the morning, sometimes it's 5 in the morning for them, and sometimes it's nighttime. And it's a wonderful feeling, and yeah, I'm very surprised by who comes, where they come from, and each group has been very different, of course, because the dynamic is made up by the people in it as well, the energy.
Are you considering writing a book about color blending?
Oh, loads of people keep asking me, but then it's like, it's doing the same thing. It's monetizing something.
Let's talk about monetizing it, because it's part of life, right? Like if you want to do it and you want to do it full time and you want to continue doing it, it has to be monetized. Like, is that a struggle? Because in order to make it a valuable business, like in order to make a living out of knitting, you have to basically do all of those things. You have to be consistent with your designs, you have to publish on certain schedule, you have to work on the social media, you have to market yourself, you have to write those tutorials, you have to do all these workshops. Is that like soul exhausting for you?
It can be, yes. And the last couple of months it's been more so because I took the Patreon on, and then I want to give people value for money. And yes, I mean, my workshops are very reasonable, and when you break it down hour for hour, I teach 2 hours online, it's very fast paced, but the admin, because it goes backwards and forwards, and then checking the payments and sending the invoices and all the numerous things before, forget the devising the workshop and setting up, you know, the time involved, it isn't for one person. For me, it probably isn't that worth it, you know. I go to work 2.5 days a week at the university to make sure that I can pay my bills, and sometimes it's tough. So I finish university at Wednesday lunch, and I've cycled home to come and see you, and then I think, oh, my life's starting now. But it's a lot of, you said it, you know, it's like, it's all the posts, it's all the contacting people, it's all the communications, and it's all the keeping everything up to date and alive. And I don't think that sometimes people are aware actually what goes behind things for the finished result.
And it's also like this expectation of you supposed to provide fun and entertainment and make it.
I know, that was the final thing. I just
belly dancing.
Well, and fun is a very personal thing, you know. It's like I can't stand at the front and do jokes. It's like, you know, that's what you could bring, actually. And it's interesting because I've realized I'm a giver. I'm a real giver, and the more you give, the more people want back. I don't mean in the workshops, I mean in general, wherever you make something or create something. So, like, for instance, I wanted to knit a jumper, so I knitted the Fair Isle neck warmer to keep my face warm, but also for a swatch for the jumper. So, you know, I just knitted it like in the spring. And then I embarked on the jumper, which is this. So every pattern in that is in this.
Right.
And I wrote the pattern for this. There are 16 patterns, 16 motifs in this in colour, and 8 in black and white, plus all the additional things. And then loads of people are going, well, can I have the vest pattern then? And really every pattern is in here. So what I would have done in the 80s now is I pick a vest pattern and use the things that I like in it, you know, and do it myself. But there seems to be, you know, this is quite hard to say, but there seems to be an element of the more you give, the more people want. And to write that, it isn't worth it.
And it's daunting. It's like, it's a lot of hours, and then you have to check every chart, and you have to check all your writing, and then if you want to do it on a professional level, you have to have the tech editors, and you have to have testers and all of this. And then how many patterns can you sell, you know? So it's becoming cost prohibitive.
The monetization of that is very low, you know, and I know a lot of people in Shetland who don't make money from patterns, and they're amazing knitters, fairly famous, you know. So I think a few make it really big. So what it is for me is a bit of a drug. I can't stop. So I can kind of, with this and this, I've put the pattern out, and really it could be done in 2 colours. So I'm going to do a knit along, and I'm going to knit it in 4 colours because I can't knit anything in 2. I'm going to knit 4 colours, and then I'm going to give it as a gift to the lady that has the they're like little Kyoto guest houses. I'm going to give it as a gift to her. So for me, it's like I'm killing 3 birds with 1 stone. You know, I'm helping people to understand, but also I can give something away at the end.
What's your favorite thing about meeting all these people?
For me, the people online, it's 2 hours, it's quick, in, out. Some people have stayed with me, really stayed with me, and they've followed me, and they've still contacted me, and they support me still, and I am eternally grateful for those wonderful women. they've supported me through everything, what I've done, right from workshops 2 years ago to Patreon then, to Patreon here, to patterns, you know, and they contact me and I know them. And it's quite remarkable that you build up kind of an online community or family, and with great regard for those people, with great respect for those people. When I go traveling, I go in a really weird way. I go on my own. I plan a bit. I don't have a lot of spare money, so I just go. And I will be going on my own with Air China, and I will be catching a train to Kyoto and then finding my way to this hostel. And I've booked 3 weeks in a tiny little attic room, and I will borrow her bike every day and go around all the temples and the bathhouses and everything. And I will guarantee I will come across some of the most extraordinary people on this earth, because that is what happens. You know, I'll sit on the pavement because I'm watching people go by, and somebody will sit beside you, and things like that happen to me. So I'm yet to, I'll let you know what happens in Japan.
I mean, are you always bringing your knitting with you?
Yeah, always. For years, everywhere. It goes everywhere. It doesn't really go to work because I'd be thinking about it, but it does go everywhere. It's on the trains. I went to the Festival of Thrift 2 weeks ago in Newcastle, and I stood under the Angel of the North knitting. I can knit and walk. I can do a lot of stuff in the dark, you know, if I go to the cinema or all sorts of things. So yeah, it goes everywhere. So it's the lifestyle. It's not a hobby. It's past a hobby.
I mean, I can totally relate to that, because I feel like when people get obsessed with knitting, it's becoming like the first thing you think of in the morning and the last thing you think about before going to sleep, and maybe even dream about it a little bit while you're sleeping.
I think you do. And also it's like sometimes I come home from work and the first thing I do is I just reach for the knitting, because I just need to do an hour to that transitional phase to bring me back to something else. So I say to the people who come to the workshops, knitting is many things. It's about well-being, it's a meaningful craft, it's about designing, it's about color, it's practical, you can make things for people, it's a learning journey, you know, it's a huge amount of things. It's not just knitting. And thankfully that's changed. The idea of grey-haired knitters knitting, you know, it's changed. So
well, I'm gonna put all the information about how people can sign up for your workshops, how they can join your Patreon, how they can take a look at that book that you wrote, see your website, buy your patterns. It's gonna be in the description of this video, and I know you guys will know what to do. So say hi from Fiberchats if you follow Tracey on Instagram or anywhere.
okay.
I want to also invite you to post your workshops at Knitters Gonna Knit on Facebook, because it's a group that David van de Kamp and I started 2 years ago, and it's now over 25,000 knitters there, and it's a great place to promote your business. So please share your journey there as well.
Thank you. I will do, because a lot of the groups don't allow you to share any information about yourself. I'm in a group called Stranded Knits, and she does. She's amazing. She's an American lady. She's very open about being able to share information, and you are. Some people don't. I've got thrown out of one.
Specifically started this group to not only allow self-promotion, but to encourage artists to promote their art and promote their patterns and promote their businesses. So please do post there.
That's wonderful, because that's a very generous thing that you're doing, you know, to encourage that, and a place for people to do that. It's very generous.
And you can also post test calls if you ever need testers. So that group was wonderful for that as well.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Tracey. It was such a pleasure to have you on my channel and get to know you a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.